Hello, everybody. It's Amber Hinds. I am one of the lead organizers of WordPress Accessibility Day. And I am here today with two friends from the WordPress community, Morgan and Matt. Can you both introduce yourself?
I'll let you go
Sure.
first, Morgan.
Okay. My name is Morgan Kay, and I'm a software engineer on the Rocket Genius product team, which means I help build Gravity Forms.
Matt Medeiros, community side of Gravity Forms, and generally help connect with people with software that Morgan and her team help make.
Great. And of course, we are super excited to have Gravity Forms back as a sponsor of WordPress Accessibility Day. You all have been a long-time sponsor and supporter of accessibility, not just supporting events, but also with putting a lot of effort into accessibility in your own plugin and your add-on plugins. I think, in fact, you might have been one of the first form plugins in the ecosystem to really start putting some effort into accessibility, which is wonderful. And I was curious to kick us off if either of you could share some thoughts on why Gravity Forms thinks that accessibility is important and worth investing in, both in your product development and in your sponsorships.
Well, for one thing, accessibility is the law in a lot of situations. So if you're building a website for a government, most governments have rules about things have to be accessible. So that's one reason we did it. But ultimately, forms are a really important tool on your website. That's how you collect information. I mean, that's the primary way that you're really letting your users give information back to you, whether you're collecting email addresses for a newsletter or payments or event registrations or whatever. So it's really important that any of your users can actually get that information to you. But even bigger picture, accessibility is just really important. Like, everybody should be able to use the web, and we really believe in that strongly. So we want to do our part to make sure that we are making sure that the internet is usable for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of a multifaceted look at it, right? There's the business reasons and just the ethical reasons.
Exactly.
But we think it's great that you support it. And do you have any thoughts that you would add, Matt, about why accessibility or anything that has been interesting to you as you joined the Gravity Forms team and saw how accessibility is thought about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we've talked about this before, but as like a former agency owner, like you can't just skip it or avoid it or hide from it because you're not educated about it anymore. That's what I used to do because I wasn't sure. I was overwhelmed, like trying to run a business and then having to understand a lot of the stuff. It could be overwhelming for somebody who's just like, I'm just trying to help people get these websites out. When I joined Gravity Forms, it was just great to see that all of the effort they already put in to the accessibility work that they do. And then, of course, it trickles down into the support team as well. And I think that, one of the great things about Gravity Forms is this on the support side for a new agency owner is if you have questions or you don't fully understand it, I mean, they won't code the forms for you, but they'll definitely tell you the best practices and the work that we put into it. So if you're like unsure on a project, it's great to have like a second, like a sounding board to be like, am I doing this right? Can you at least point me in the right direction to some resources? And it was great to see that Gravity Forms, invested in that side of things.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because I don't frequently think of product or plugin support as I can go there and get recommendations for how I can make my website better with the plugin. I just think of it, I think the plugin's broken, I'm going to go message them, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's more thought at Gravity Forms just in general about the support being like almost like a cheerleader, an extra team. And I think I've seen some of that with some of the documentation and the resources that you all are putting out there, that you're trying to do more than just, we're debugging things. Is that right?
Yeah. That's the hope. They're obviously every situation is different. Every customer's needs are different. And if it's something that somebody on the team knows the answer to, or knows the place that we can point them to, absolutely they'll share it. A lot of folks working on the support team have been here for like over a decade, so they know so much that has come across the support desk. So yeah, adding that extra layer of help and support is something that they do all the time.
Yeah. Morgan, I'm curious because I know you came in and were part of a lot of the coding effort and that kind of stuff to do a lot of the accessibility pushes a few years ago. What advice do you have for other people working on WordPress product teams that are considering making their plugins, or maybe they're a theme company, more accessible?
My biggest piece of advice is hire an expert. There is so much to know about accessibility, and a lot of it is honestly fiddly. Like there's just a lot of really little details to know. And as a developer, you can learn all of it, absolutely, but there's also a lot of other stuff we need to know as developers. Like there's just a lot of technology that we're working with. So if you can hire an expert, someone whose day-to-day focus is just on accessibility, that person is going to have a ton of knowledge. They're going to be able to give you a lot of information. We hired Rian Reitveld to do an accessibility review of our product, and there's no way we could have become fully accessible without her help. So hiring an expert, whether it's just to like do a one-time review or to kind of be on hand all the time to help out when you have accessibility questions, is really, really worth the investment. And the other big piece of advice is don't make it an afterthought. Think about it from the very beginning, because if you don't work on accessibility until everything else is done, you're going to have to go back and redo a bunch of stuff. So consider it from the get-go and build it into all of your workflows from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like there is some stuff that can be remediated with ARIA, which people can learn more if they Google ARIA on the Mozilla, or you look on the Mozilla developer docs, has really good resources on that. But we always say in the accessibility community, the first rule of ARIA is don't use ARIA. So if you can use the semantic elements, right, like the right HTML, that definitely is beneficial. And I can imagine if you haven't thought about it and having to think about, oh man, now I have to totally rebuild this thing as a developer, that could be frustrating.
Well, and Gravity Forms has been around for a long time. So, Gravity Forms was built before web accessibility was really a big deal. So we have had to go back and completely rewrite a lot of things. And there's more in our code base that we do need to just like completely rewrite to make it accessible. So the earlier you think about it, the less work you'll have to do down the road.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts about how to prioritize that? Because I think there are a lot of plugins like Gravity Forms that came to the ecosystem really early, have legacy code bases. And this doesn't just stretch to accessibility. I think this applies to sometimes like security or WordPress coding standards or things like that. I know we, in my company, just went through this huge thing earlier this year of going to be more object oriented instead of very procedural code, which was the easy way we wrote it in the beginning, right? Yeah. Do you have thoughts about how you prioritize those kinds of things?
We think about the impact, the number of users being impacted. So the front end of Gravity Forms is totally accessible, or can be totally accessible. So that's impacting the most customers, because that's not only our direct customers, but also anybody visiting our customers' websites. So that's millions of people. So that's a really big impact. Now we're starting to focus more on making the dashboard accessible. And there we're kind of balancing what parts of this are easy to do, because we can do that quickly, but also what are the parts of our product that people use the most. So obviously the form editor is where people are spending most of their time. So that's what we're focusing on making accessible next, because that's going to have the biggest impact on our users.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I want to highlight a little bit something that you mentioned there that people may or may not have noticed, which is that you said the front end can be accessible.
Yes.
And I'm curious if either of you want to elaborate on that, and what that means.
That means we have given you all of the tools to build completely accessible forms, but it's still ultimately up to content creators and users to set up forms correctly. You can also build not accessible forms with Gravity Forms if you want.
Mm-hmm. So given that, could you share maybe some of the common accessibility mistakes that you have seen in forms, or things that maybe content creators or website owners should watch out for?
Honestly, a lot of the mistakes I see people make are not just accessibility standards violations. It's things like removing labels and using placeholders instead. And that makes your form look awfully pretty. It's nice and tidy and clean, but it also means that people now can't see the label of your form and they don't know what they're filling out. So, and that's a problem. That's not only an accessibility violation, but that's a problem for people who don't have any accessibility needs. Like, you still can't see the label, and that's bad. The other one I see a lot is people building really long, complex forms with a ton of fields and a lot of pages and no guidance to users about, you're on page 1 out of 7, and this is the kind of information. I mean, there's just kind of no guidance, nothing to help the user understand why they're going to spend the next 45 minutes of their lives filling out this form. So I think people need to think more carefully about just the architecture of a form, and making a form that's going to be easy to fill out, even if sometimes you do legitimately need a long form, but you should help your users get through that process as much as you can.
I'm curious, Matt, if you have thoughts on that from like agency days, and how you thought about building those forms so that they would be usable, and maybe talked clients down from some of the things they were asking for.
Yeah, well, I would say that one of the things that Gravity Forms does is, for some of those fields where you could really make some really big mistakes, is I believe we're warning you on like the big ones, which I think might be like the I'm going to forget the name of it now, but like the list multiple choice where you can multi-select, but it's like
multi-select form. Yeah. Field.
Multi-select. So I've always, again, and it's been a while since I've run an agency, but I've always depended on that as like the best practices. And when we were building forms, we were just like, okay, I guess we'll just avoid this and do it the way Gravity Forms wants us to do. So that's how I used to approach it back in the agency days.
Yeah. I really like that, the warnings and the admin. I haven't seen a lot of plugins do that. And I really think that it is something that we need more of, not just in plugins, but in WordPress core. There's a little bit of it in WordPress core. Like there's the color contrast warning on blocks now. But I think, most people creating websites have never even heard of accessibility. So I applaud you all on doing things that educate content creators about accessibility in the admin. So if people want to learn more about building accessible forms, I know you have a lot of resources. Do you have any that you want to call out, or good ways that you can point people to learning more about building accessible forms with Gravity Forms?
I'll go with a future teaser. We have a Learn site coming, a dedicated Learn site, which Amber, you'll be featured on, because you probably don't even remember, but months ago, you recorded a session with me.
I do remember that. I was wondering what happened to that.
You were wondering what happened with that. So we'll be putting that up on the Learn site. And I think it's like your half an hour webinar that you did with me is like a 4-part lesson, so that people can go through and, just fun little like light duty quizzes that can help you understand, you understand the topic at hand, and, the presentation that, say, like Amber and Brian Cords and some other folks that helped with it. So I'm excited for that. It's been a pet project of mine internally. So soft launching, hopefully at WordCamp US next week, where I'll start telling people how to get access to it, and then we'll make it accessible to all of Gravity Forms users in a couple of weeks after that, once we squash all the bugs. But from my side, that's what I'm excited about. And we're always trying to teach this stuff, not only from that official Learn site, but on the podcast and the YouTube channel as much as we possibly can.
And you're just at Gravity Forms on YouTube and the podcast. How's the best way to find that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's the podcast is gravityforms.com/breakdown, or just search Breakdown Gravity Forms in your favorite podcast app. And then it's at Gravity WP. I believe I should really know that off the top of my head. At Gravity WP.
Throwing you a curveball in the middle of a live stream. Oh, it's fun.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, well, you kind of preempted one of the questions that I was going to ask you, because I always love to have chats with some of my favorite plugins and get to hear like little insider information. And I won't tell anyone or share this with anyone, right? But I promise, neither will all the people watching. But so you've teased us on the Learn, but Morgan, is there anything on the technical or the add-on side that might be coming with Gravity Forms that you can tease and not get in trouble with telling the word?
No, I absolutely can, because actually Gravity Forms 2.9 beta is out now. So if you want to get that, if you have a Gravity Forms license, you can go to the downloads page on the Gravity Forms site and you can download the beta. And the super exciting thing in beta is that we have a new image choice field that lets you upload images and then add those images to a radio or checkbox field so that people can pick images instead of just picking text. So that's a super exciting feature coming out very soon.
That is interesting. And I'm assuming it would allow you to set an alt text or something on the image.
It uses the WordPress media library, so it'll use whatever alt text you use when you upload your image.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, a neat thing that we can all go try out, and I'm assuming give you some feedback on if we encounter anything.
Yes, please.
So it's Gravity. Sorry, I just want to add, it's gravityforms.com/beta if you don't have access to it. So if you want to join the air quotes program, go to gravityforms.com/beta. Great.
Good to know. So I would love to talk about WordPress Accessibility Day, which is coming up October 9th through 10th. For anyone who is not aware, it is a free online conference that happens via Zoom. We have captions and sign language interpreters, and it runs for 24 hours, which is why we say October 9th through 10th. So we start on October 9th and we end on October 10th. So no matter where you are in the world, there will be sessions during business hours or during evenings when you're drinking your beverage of choice and wearing your pajamas. You can eat some popcorn and watch us on your screen. So I'd love to just chat a little bit about the schedule. I don't know if either of you have had a chance to look at some of the sessions, and if any of them look interesting to you and you want to share them with our viewers.
There's one I'm really interested in called Navigating Neurodiversity. One of the things one of my soapboxes is that accessibility isn't just about screen readers and keyboard navigation, that there's a lot of other stuff to think about with accessibility too. And this talk on neurodiversity looks like it's going to be a really interesting way of thinking about more people we can be making our forms accessible to.
Yeah. I think that neurodiversity topic probably really aligns with some of the things you were saying about really thinking about your questions and how you display them and maybe use conditional logic. And I remember, Matt, when we talked last year, at one point we were talking about how Gravity Forms has the ability, and I always forget what these forms are called, to just show one question at a time. What is that add-on called?
Conversational forms.
Conversational forms, yeah. And that almost seems like for certain neurodiverse audiences, or maybe people with ADD or ADHD, it might be helpful to just get one at a time. And it's kind of interesting to think about that. Yeah. What about you, Matt? What stands out?
Yeah, I'm excited to see Beth Hannon kick things off. fantastic. I've met her in person. I've known her for a while, but met her in person at WordCamp US this last summer, and excited to hear that. And then I'm really interested in the page builder accessibility. I forget the exact title, but it's accessibility for page builders, because my God, you can't throw a stone without without somebody saying something about a page builder. And I'm really interested to see like how that all comes together, because for as much whatever heat that page builders take from the developer side, I've seen it now, like as being at Gravity Forms now for over a year. I don't envy the stress a page builder team has to go through to make, like, you're making code easy for people through a builder, right?
And design.
This is not easy stuff. So let's dial down the pressure, and let's interested to hear how people approach it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's page builder accessibility has been sort of a pet project of mine. So I also am very much looking forward to that talk, because I love to hear what other people have found. And I've only done like small looks at pieces of page builders. So I'm curious to see what this person has focused on. And it's interesting too, thinking about that, because some page builders have forms built into them. So, it might be interesting just to watch on that front and see if they talk about page builder forms. I always am of the mindset that you should have a form plugin for your forms, because the form plugin specializes, and therefore it can really do it right, versus something that's kind of the bigger tool that can do a lot of things. But so there are tons of really neat things on the schedule. If anyone hasn't checked it out, you can find it at 2024.wpaccessibility.day/schedule. So, of course, you all are sponsoring. And one of the wonderful things with our sponsors is that we do some giveaways and some other great things for attendees, which we very much thank you for your generosity there. And I heard from the sponsors team that you all will be giving away a elite license of Gravity Forms, so people can go to the Gravity Forms sponsor page during the event and enter to win. And then after the event, we'll give all those email addresses to Gravity Forms, and you'll do sort of a random drawing and select a winner. But can you share with everyone what is an elite license of Gravity Forms entail?
Yeah, so it's going to give you the highest priority level of support from the Gravity Forms team. There's a ton of other details, gravityforms.com/pricing, and you can see the elite versus pro versus basic breakdown. But, I've always, with the agency mindset and the agency hat on, I feel like Gravity Forms does a good job of like leveling your licenses up as you probably expand your skill set as a freelancer or taking on clients as an agency. So basic, pro, and then elite. Elite unlocks some of the really cool things like the conversational forms, user registration, webhooks, survey quiz, signature. And that generally means, at least in my world, is like, oh, I can do more for my clients now. And at the price point of an elite plan, it's a pretty easy trade-off to be like, oh, I can build these types of sites for clients, for this small fee. And the elite license really just unlocks everything that we have to offer. And as it stands right now, it's also going to include our new Gravity SMTP product, which is a standalone plugin for sending emails safely, securely through a email sending service. And then it brings all that information and data. You can tie in multiple email sending services right in your WordPress dashboard. So if you're building sites for customers and they're like, I can't miss these emails. These are important emails that come through Gravity Forms, lead gen, purchases, donations for nonprofit sites. Gravity SMTP makes sure that those emails gets delivered, not only for your own edification, but for your client's business or organization. So that is also included in the elite plan.
Oh, that's great. I did not realize about that. So I'm going to have to go look, because I personally have one of those licenses. So that's neat. So that basically would mean that it allows people to send from an email address at their domain instead of like the WordPress PHP mail kind of junky server email address.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You can use almost all of the most popular sending services that you can name: SendGrid, Postmark, Brevo, all of those types of platforms. You can configure them right through the Gravity SMTP plugin. You can also assign like a backup one as well. So if you have a mission critical website, or you just do a ton of email coming out of your contact forms, you can set up 2 routes. And then you see all the stats and all the logs right inside WordPress. So when something happens, customer says, hey, I didn't get that receipt, you didn't get my donation form, you can punch into that right inside your WordPress dashboard and see what's happening. And then we got a bunch of other fun stuff planned for it in the future. But that's the idea of it right now.
That's neat. Can you send with like Azure, like Microsoft email or Google email integrations, or is it just for the SMTP services?
Google and 365. I don't know about Azure yet, but 365. Okay. And I think the next one that just got released was SES as well, Amazon SES.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, I have no idea what that is. Tell I'm not a developer. All the developers knew what that meant.
Yeah.
So cool.
I just know the terms.
So it sounds like this is a phenomenal license that people can enter to win on your sponsor page on the WordPress Accessibility Day website. Of course, you have to register to attend WordPress Accessibility Day in order to get access to enter to win. So if you have not registered yet, make sure that you go and register. Well, I don't know if either of you have any closing thoughts that you want to share related to Gravity Forms and accessibility, or the WordPress Accessibility Day in your experience before we wrap up.
I'll just throw one note. I think on that previous question where you said where you asked about other WordPress product owners and plugins, working towards accessibility. Another great resource. Obviously, Amber, is your own podcast, and pointing to podcasts around WordPress. I think it's always a topic that's being discussed and debated and brought up. So, if you're in the WordPress space, I mean, obviously an agency as well, seeking out your podcast and other podcasts that are constantly talking about this topic is another great resource, for this stuff.
Yeah, thank you for that shout out. Yeah, our podcast is called Accessibility Craft, and you can find it. We talk craft beverages and accessibility. Do you have any final thoughts, Morgan, or anything you want to share?
No, don't think so. Okay. Definitely excited for Accessibility Day, and always great to see people coming together to work on these things and to make sure that everybody is thinking about accessibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for joining me and braving the sponsor live stream. Of course, I know it's old hat for Matt, but but we do appreciate it, and helping everything that you do to help support WordPress Accessibility Day, the event. If anyone wants to learn more about Gravity Forms or get in touch with either of you personally, where is the best place to go?
gravityforms.com. It's youtube.com/@gravitywp, and gravityforms.com/breakdown if you want a great podcast to listen to the team, hear from the team, hear from people in our Gravity Forms universe, hosted by yours truly. gravityforms.com/breakdown.
Great. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
For everyone who's listening, again, that web address where you can go and register is 2024.wpaccessibility.day. Go there, see the schedule, see our amazing speakers, all the volunteers who are helping to make the event possible. This morning, we had an organizer meeting, and there are 771 people registered for the event. If you have not registered, you need to join them. Go register today. It is totally free. And we'll be back for another sponsor live stream in a couple